You've probably met this child before, the one adults point at in crowded family gatherings and say things like, "Wow, she's so mature for her age." "He's like the little man of the house. She understands more than kids her age. She's different." They say it like a compliment, like a badge of honor, like early emotional maturity is some kind of trophy. But if you look a little closer, there's something off. This child laughs at the right times, nods at the right moments, remembers the tiny details that keep everyone else comfortable. They pour juice for younger siblings before pouring one for themselves. They listen to adults fight in the next room and quietly turn up the TV for the little ones so they don't hear. They're always fine, always okay, always handling it. On the surface, it looks like responsibility. It looks like strength. It looks like they grew up early because they were just built that way. But here's the uncomfortable truth. This is not a gifted childhood, not a natural old soul, not a cute personality trait. This is a survival strategy, not mature for their age, not raised right, not such a good kid. But a child forced to grow up too fast, living inside a body that still wants to play, carrying a mind already doing the emotional labor of an adult. That's the hidden psychology no one talks about. Because on the outside, the world gives them applause. On the inside, they live in a constant, quiet negotiation with chaos. See, the psychology of children who mature early is often misunderstood. Society loves the outcome, the polite, helpful, emotionally aware child, but it rarely asks what it cost them to become that way. You hear it in phrases like, "She just gets it." "He's the rock of the family." "She's like a second mom to her siblings." And under those compliments, there's a silent assumption. If you can carry this, you should carry this. That's how parentification begins. It's when a child becomes the emotional regulator, the mediator, the caretaker, the therapist, the partner stand-in. They carry the psychological impact of early responsibility, while everyone else treats it like a personality type. So on the outside, they get external validation. "You're so mature, you're so responsible, you're so strong." But inside, something else is happening. When you grow up too fast, your identity forms around usefulness. Your worth becomes performance. Your safety becomes linked to how well you can manage other people's emotions. That's the real psychology behind growing up too fast. It's not that the child loves responsibility. It's that they fear. What happens if they stop holding everything together? So the world celebrates them, but they don't feel celebrated. They feel necessary. And that's a very different thing. Over time, something shifts inside them. On one side, you have the noise, the praise, the expectations, the subtle pressure to keep performing the mature role. On the other side, you have a quiet internal voice that doesn't really care about being seen as impressive. It just wants stability, safety, space to exist without managing everyone else. External validation says, "Look how well you're doing." Internal reality whispers, "This is the only way I know not to lose everything." For a child forced to mature early, silence becomes their anchor. Not the passive silence of being shy, but the active silence of someone who has already learned that talking about their needs creates more chaos, not less. They don't overshare. They don't throw tantrums. They don't demand. They observe. They read micro-expressions like weather forecasts. They sense tension in a room like a shift in air pressure. They gauge the emotional state of the adults before deciding who they're allowed to be today. While other kids are learning how to ride a bike or share toys, they're learning how to de-escalate fights, how to anticipate anger, how to soothe a crying parent. This is the psychology of a child who carries an emotional burden too big for their age. What looks like early emotional maturity is often just highly trained self-erasure. They disappear so others can function. But here's the hidden turn. What began as a survival mechanism can also become a strange kind of strength later. When you've spent your whole childhood managing atmospheres, you develop a rare sensitivity to people's inner worlds. You can walk into a room and feel what's happening before anyone speaks. You can hear what's not being said. The same hypervigilance that once kept you safe can, if healed and redirected, become a form of deep emotional intelligence, not the kind that performs for approval, but the kind that understands, empathizes, and sets boundaries. That's the internal shift. From, I must take care of everyone to be safe, to, I can care deeply without abandoning myself. To really understand the psychology of children who mature too early, you have to enter their sensory landscape. Most kids live in a world of images, bright colors, toys, cartoons, games. But these children live in a world of atmospheres. They don't just see what's happening. They feel it in their nervous system. The slam of a door is not just a sound. It's a signal. The pause before a sentence is not just silence. It's a warning. The way a glass is placed on the table tells them if tonight will be calm or dangerous. They move through life like emotional seismographs. While others are looking at the scene, they're reading the temperature of the room, tone of voice, breathing rhythms, subtle shifts in posture. This is what childhood emotional development looks like when it's forced into overdrive. Now, imagine the world they live in as a giant marketplace. Everyone shouting, everyone selling, everyone performing. That marketplace is the family conflict, the financial instability, the addiction, the mental illness, the unspoken tension. It's crowded, loud, and constantly demanding attention. In the middle of that chaos, this child builds something else inside them, a private garden. In that garden, everything is quiet. No one is asking them to fix anything. No one is crying on their shoulder. No one is turning them into a substitute adult. It's where they go in their head when the yelling starts, when responsibilities stack up, when they're making dinner for siblings, at an age when they should be making a mess with crayons. In that hidden inner garden, they still feel like a child. They imagine. They dream of another life. They picture a home where adults act like adults. The tragedy is that this garden is secret, because if they show it, someone will call them selfish, ungrateful, dramatic. So they protect it like it's sacred. The marketplace gets their energy. The garden gets their truth. And that's one of the most painful psychological consequences of lost childhood. Your inner world becomes private, not because you're introverted, but because it's the only place you're allowed to be small. Where does this all begin? There are many stories, but they tend to orbit around three core archetypes, three origins of forced maturity. The first is the child, the one conditioned by environment. This is the classic scenario people think of when they talk about children who grow up too fast. Maybe one parent disappears. Maybe both parents are physically there, but emotionally absent. Maybe there's addiction, chronic illness, untreated trauma, or constant fighting. The home becomes unstable, so the child becomes stable. Not because they want to, but because someone has to. They wake up early to get siblings ready for school. They learn to read their parents' moods better than their own. They become the emotional adult in a house full of chronological adults. In psychology, this is where parentification lives. The roles flip. The child becomes the caretaker. The second archetype is the awakening, the conscious rejection of the game. This child may not have grown up in chaos at first. Maybe things were normal enough, but then something happens. A divorce, a financial collapse, a betrayal, a relocation. They see behind the curtain too early. They realize the people they depended on are just as confused, scared, and lost as anyone else. And in that moment, they make an internal vow. I can't afford to be naive. I can't afford to be just a kid. So they grow up on purpose. They start thinking 5 steps ahead. They become strategic, hyper-responsible, constantly anticipating outcomes. They don't wait for adults to handle things anymore. They become their own anchor. It's not just forced maturity, it's chosen fast-forwarding, a survival upgrade disguised as wisdom. The third archetype is the nature, the child born wired for depth. Even in relatively stable environments, some children simply feel more. They're highly sensitive, deeply observant, naturally reflective. They notice the cracks in people's voices, the sadness behind forced smiles, the unresolved grief adults carry. No one explicitly forces them to grow up, but their nervous system won't let them stay simple. They absorb everything. They overhear one conversation about money and carry it like a secret responsibility. They sense when a parent is overworked and immediately try to be less of a burden. They understand concepts like death, loss, and injustice far earlier than others. Their early emotional maturity isn't entirely shaped by trauma, but it's amplified by a world that doesn't know what to do with kids, who are already thinking like philosophers. In all three archetypes, the child, the awakening, the nature, the pattern is the same. The world asks for more than childhood was designed to hold, and the child, in their own way, says yes, because they don't see another option. So what does all of this mean, beyond one person's story? When you zoom out, forced maturity in childhood becomes a mirror for how we treat vulnerability in general. We reward people for skipping their softness. We admire those who carry more than their share. We normalize the idea that losing your childhood is acceptable if it produces someone efficient, productive, and emotionally useful. But there's a cost to turning children into emotional adults too early. You don't just lose play, you lose trust in life. If you spent your early years being the one who holds everyone else together, it's hard to later believe that anyone will hold you. If your worth was built on being the strong one, resting feels like danger. Needing others feels like a threat. That's the long-term psychology of growing up too fast. You build a self that is allergic to being taken care of. Yet, there's a strange, almost poetic twist. The very people whose childhoods were interrupted often become the ones most capable of building safer worlds later, because they know exactly what was missing. They know what it feels like to be the child who is never checked on, to be the one who understands too much, too early, to be treated like an adult emotionally, but like a child legally. So when they heal, when they start to reconnect with the parts of themselves that were postponed, something powerful happens. They don't just chase success, they build safety. They don't just crave freedom, they create stability. They don't just want love, they learn how to give it without demanding self-erasure in return. The universal truth hiding underneath the psychology of early maturity is this: time does not care about roles. Your nervous system remembers everything it had to skip. You can play adult for the world, but your inner child keeps a quiet record. And until you sit with that child, listen to them, and let them exist without a checklist, no achievement will feel like enough, not because you're broken, but because you are finally trying to move at your own natural speed, not the emergency pace life forced on you. So where does that leave you, now that you're no longer a child? It leaves you with a choice that you didn't have back then. Back then, saying no wasn't possible. You couldn't refuse the emotional burden. You couldn't hand back the responsibility. Now, you can. Now, the signs of a child maturing too early, over-responsibility, constant emotional scanning, fear of resting, are no longer just symptoms. They're messages. They're reminders that something sacred in you wants to move from duty to dignity, from survival to self-ownership, from being needed to being known. You may never get back the childhood you lost, but you are not doomed to repeat its logic forever. You can build a life where love doesn't require over-functioning, where your value isn't measured in how much you carry, where your inner garden is no longer just a secret escape, but the foundation of how you live. You are not simply the product of the effects of growing up too fast. You are the person who lived through it, saw its cost, and now has the power to do something radically different. That is the quiet revolution of those who were forced to grow up too early. They become the generation that decides childhood should not be paid for, with silence, guilt, and invisible labor. You were once the child who had no choice but to be strong. Now, you are the adult who is finally allowed to be human, and that changes everything.